Call takers and dispatchers for emergency services lines say daily nuisance calls are still being made in Victoria, despite a recent national ambulance campaign attempting to decrease the amount of inconvenient calls. Adair Winder reports. The recently launched campaign by Ambulance Victoria, South Australia and Queensland in January 2018, titled Save Lives, Save 000 for Emergencies, was televised with the aim to re-educate people on what really defines an emergency. The Emergency Services Telecommunications Agency, ESTA, has stated that the immense quantity of these calls does not only apply to Ambulance Victoria, but is across the board with all emergency services, such as the police, fire and state emergency service lines. The campaign was intended to limit unnecessary calls, therefore allowing paramedics to use their resources to deal with more life-threatening emergencies. Many emergency services staff in Victoria believe little has come from the campaign. Amy Stubberfield, an emergency services dispatcher, suggests that Victoria adopting a non-emergency call line would be a better solution.
The big disadvantage we have here in Victoria is that we don't have a non-emergency 000 line. A lot of the other states have that line.
A non-emergency call line, which has been adopted by all the other states in Australia, is used for citizens who wish to call about things that do not necessarily require urgent resources, such as noise complaints, trapped animals, or situations where the culprit has left the scene of the crime, better known as cold crimes. Victoria previously had 3 non-emergency lines, which were known as Emergency Services Assistance Numbers, ESSN, which were decommissioned by Telstra in October of 2002. The lines were deactivated due to funding cuts and the end of a contract with a company called Intergraph. Intergraph was contracted to run the call centres at the time. The re-adoption of a non-emergency line in Victoria would mean the filtering out of non-critical emergencies and would also seek to reduce queues on the emergency line. At the time when the 3 SN numbers were made inactive and instead replaced with the policy of calling 000 for all emergency services, 40% of all calls to emergency services were still going out to those inactive numbers. In March 2017, ESTA declared that an average of 95,000 calls to 000 are nuisance calls within Victoria every year. Amy Hoyne, a call taker for ESTA, states that nuisance calls end up resulting in time and resources being wasted, particularly when emergency officers have been sent to the location of the nuisance caller.
You have to treat every single call as it's an ongoing emergency. You can't even pretend to know that person or know that they're a hoax caller.
Most of the nuisance calls that come through the emergency line are often known by ESTA staff as regulars, as they often come from the same people. Amy Stubberfield admits that.
It's quite difficult sometimes because a few years ago we had some issues with a gentleman who would remove his SIM card and then call, so then that way you couldn't actually track that he was calling. And I think in like a 4 or 5 hour period he called 200 or 300 times.
Narelle Okapinti, a trainer for call takers at ESTA, claims that most of the people that regularly call are often battling with mental illness.
I don't think they realise the extremity of what they're holding up. It's usually people either reporting stuff that isn't happening, stuff that they're imagining or pretending is happening.
A regular nuisance or hoax caller can end up being placed on the nuisance caller list, meaning that emergency services staff are automatically aware that the caller has a history of regularly blocking the lines with non-emergency scenarios. The worst consequence for repetitive, unnecessary calls can result in jail time for the offender. Education is now being provided in schools to teach youths the difference between emergency and non-emergency situations. Adair Winder, signing off.